the Rotunda, and the museum's first children's room. That's her on the right. And in the bottom, you'll see the Brickstore Museum. I think Cynthia Walker is actually with us here today. Edith Queensberry was the founder and director of this Brickstore Museum in Kennebunk, Maine, and it's one of the only few museums that opened during the Great Depression. So along with the many contributions of those individuals and many who I haven't named, there are these organizations like the Colonial Dames and the Rhode Island Women's Centennial Committee and the Junior League that also assisted in the growth and flourishing of museums. I believe the Colonial Dames to this day still continue to have a seat on the board at Gore Place in Waltham.
That is true.
And the Gore Place director is in the picture on the right. The point here is that we in the 21st century museums have a wealth of examples of earlier generations of female museum pioneers if we just dig a bit deeper. Women in the museum field provide us with a legacy of successful preservation efforts, a commitment to public engagement, an early embrace of modernism, and a dedication to making the field better for all.
So this is myth number 3, the salary disparity between male and female museum workers is a thing of the past. I have heard this myself, and I can say that it's just we all know this is not true. There was a recent study that just came out from the GuideStar who did a massive report looking at 990s, and women across the field of nonprofits were paid anywhere from 8% to 25% less than their male counterparts. And we get sometimes, I can share from my own experience, I've even had somebody say that they work in the government field and they say there are laws against this, it can't be true. And that is true in some government positions where it's all publicly posted, but that is not so with how people are promoted and the equal opportunities that men and women have at their positions. And we can now just...
And Matthew, I would just add in one more thing here. This is Ann, that those of you who are following USA Women's Hockey know that they have been lobbying for equal pay with the men's hockey team to the point where they were talking about not playing in any championship games or going to the Olympics. And I understand that this morning they've reached some sort of an agreement, although not maybe the best. So the notion of disparity yet is widespread across all industries, and certainly within the museum field, because we're so small, I think we see it more clearly, perhaps.
And there are things that are being worked towards to help address this, such as posting when a job posting is available, sharing what the salary range is, so that way it's equal footing at the beginning. So we're seeing small steps.
And this is Joan. I was just going to add that that the salary disparity stays with women all their lives, and that if you start at a much lower salary, and many of us have started $6,000 to $10,000 in difference between our male counterparts, over time, that you can end up with an almost $500,000 difference by the time you get to retirement.
And we're going to move on to the next myth.
And myth number 4, there are so many women in the museum field now that gender equity will happen on its own. While there are a significant number of women in the museum field, 41% according to the latest Bureau of Labor Statistics numbers alone will not solve inequality in the field. Issues like equal pay, as we've been mentioning, parental leave, non-discrimination hiring statements that include gender identity and gender expression, childcare needs, and sexual harassment problems will not fix themselves. These are field-wide problems that need to be solved.
And this one is, it's not about gender anymore. And these 5 words speak volumes. We don't disagree with this, but it's because the argument is that we've moved on from gender. We've now talking about it's more about race integration or any other forms of equality outside of gender, because the gender thing has already been done. But that's obviously, judging by the others, are myths, not the truth. And we believe, we don't disagree again, but we focus is on that all women need to work together to make it equal for all women. And only then can you join together and address the equality towards men. And men are also involved in this because they need to step off of their thrones a little bit and address these issues that are blatantly seen throughout. And I open this up to anybody else who also wants to share here.
No, I think you've said it well, Matthew.
All right.
Yeah. Myth number 6, change only happens from the top down. So the truth is, while change coming from the top down can be a positive thing if implemented correctly, it is often the middle out and bottom up approach that generates the most effective change. CEOs, directors, and boards are sometimes preoccupied with fundraising and strategic planning. Therefore, it is the middle managers and frontline visitor staff that see how policies and workplace culture affect everyday lives. That's why it is important that employees at all levels know what to expect of an equal workplace and are vigilant in monitoring how their workplaces can be improved. Conversations among peers can help strengthen confidence in workers' rights. Suggestions and comments can be brought to direct supervisors to raise awareness of workplace inequities and hopefully find solutions. If inequities are still persisting and you can't seem to go through your middle manager, frontline staff can bring their suggestions and comments to upper management. And with larger issues, which require institutional change, CEOs, directors, and boards can only implement new policies when they're aware of them and are convinced of current problems and the solution. So your voice matters.
Yes, and I kind of see this as, change only happens from the top down is a whole argument which we were all familiar with hearing through this past election cycle, which is just trickle-down economics. It's like it's everybody involved that can make change happen.
So before I jump into this slide, I want to bring down another poll question and let you all take a look at that. The question is, where do you find the most women in your museum workplace? And we've got several choices here: the curatorial department, the educational department, including docents, the development department, other, or women are found evenly represented in all departments. So we'll give you a minute to weigh in on that question.
I was just thinking about that survey question a little bit about how I work at Gore Place, and I missed my introduction at the beginning. So it's Matthew at Gore Place. But in our museum, I think we are a staff of around 9 or so, and it's mostly women, with only 3 men on the staff.
Mm-hmm. And we certainly found in our first poll question, in our first set of poll questions, that the majority, it appears, of staff among the folks here on our webinar today, they are from staffs that are majority female, no matter the size of their institution. So that's interesting. Can we see the responses to this question now as they're coming in? Thank you. Thank you. Evenly represented, 38% of you.
Interesting.
So I think I'm going to go back to does anybody want to comment on that? I'm glad.
Interesting that there's 0 in curatorial department.
Yeah.
We actually had a couple comments in the chat feature. Betsy mentioned
right.
It's where are the men? She said exhibits is 50% and maintenance is 100%. And Jennifer backed her up on that one too.
Mm-hmm.
And Kathy, it's also, I'm wondering, to put in here, is it also maybe the type of museum that you're at? Does that have an impact?
To some extent, yes. Yes. Think of, here's a stereotype. Think of a transportation museum or think of a military museum. There may be, one might expect to find more men in the curatorial ranks, the educational ranks.
Yeah, and children's museums are very typically staffed by women, whereas military, transportation, decoys, all men.
And I think, Kathy's point, and Betsy's too, that right when you're looking at finance, fabrication, maintenance, that's where you're going to find more males than females, generally speaking. The thing is, it's really hard to make generalizations, much beyond the most broad ones. So let's take a look at the numbers, and maybe I can clarify some of that a little bit. So Scarlett and Matthew have shared a lot of information about today's museum workforce as they've attempted to shatter the general myths, the most common myths that surround gender equity. And I thought it might be good to share some of the numbers that we're talking about so you can actually see them. And the first set of women in the museum workforce, the numbers come from the Bureau of Labor Statistics, a federal agency. And we like the Bureau because they update employment numbers annually as opposed to the census, which isn't annual necessarily. And so I've put 3 years worth of numbers here. The good news is that museums seem to be a growth industry, which is great, and that the number of women workers hovers just below 50%. And that's been, and I would imagine it's pretty relational among all three of those. So that alone, that percentage figure is often a surprise for a lot of people who believe that it's got to be more than 41% women, because when they look around at their museums, as you do, or at museum conferences or on this webinar today, the majority of people they see are women. But when you take into account all the people working in museums, from the director to the person mowing the lawn, the numbers of women and men are far more balanced overall, and that's a good thing. Unlike libraries and archives and some other professions where women outnumber men 75% and more, we're fairly balanced, and I think that makes for an opportunity for us, for the museum field generally, to talk about these issues and kind of get on top of these issues. And I think we're in a good place to have these discussions. So the fact about women clustering in certain departments and job titles, our survey just now didn't really bear that out. But when you look at some of the salary surveys that are done, clearly there are certain job titles and departments that attract a majority of women. Often among them are the curatorial aspects, the educational aspects. Development is another one. HR is another one. Those departments tend to be overwhelmingly female. And some would say it's because these departments are the quote-unquote caring or serving departments, as opposed to departments like finance and facilities and security. In fact, in AAM's 2014 National Comparative Museum Salary Survey, it was noted that very few positions demonstrated gender balance. This does reinforce gender stereotyping within our field, and is one reason why we all need to encourage ourselves and women generally in our field to pursue all types of museum jobs, especially ones that expand their aspirations and hone their skills. And lastly, I just want to talk about the pay gap, because that's going to come up again and again, I think. And the bottom line here is that the pay gap exists across all museum disciplines, in museums of all sizes and locations and job titles. The 2014, the first statistic I have listed there, that's for women across all industries, for-profit and nonprofit. Women now make 79.6 cents less than men across all industries. In AAM, in their 2014 salary survey, they looked at directors and reported out on that 71 cents. Women earn 71 cents of every male director's dollar. And then in the most recent report from AAMD, the Association of Art Museum Directors. They just updated their gender gap report. They're showing that women art museum directors in institutions that have budgets greater than $15 million are earning 75 cents to every man's dollar, but smaller art museums, those with budgets under 15 million, the wage gap is less, and they're more on par with one another. That $15 million demarcation is important because it also, AAMD has found that institutions, art museums that is, with budgets more than $15 million also have fewer numbers of women directors. So as Joan hinted a few minutes ago, that this unequal salaries and wages have both short-term and long-term impacts for women. Obviously, in the short term, the paycheck you bring home has to pay for all the same expenses that a man's paycheck pays for the most part. The rent is the same, the mortgage is the same, groceries are the same, et cetera, et cetera. But in the longer term, because women are earning less money overall, when when it's their turn to retire, their Social Security benefits are going to be smaller because their cumulative pay has been smaller. If they're fortunate to have pensions, their pensions are going to be smaller because they're based on their paychecks. And particularly for single women, the prospect of a retirement in poverty is a very real prospect indeed. So I just ask you to please keep this information in mind when you hear information to the contrary. The issues are real, no glass ceiling, or I should say a glass ceiling, sorry about that. There is a glass ceiling. There's a majority female, I'm sorry, what I really want to say is when you hear stuff to the contrary, like there's no glass ceiling, or there's more women than men in the field, or there's no pay gap, you now know differently. And so with that, I'm going to turn it over to Joan. And I'll switch the slide for you.
So many of you have heard the term pink collar field. What comes to mind when we say the words male-dominated profession?
Joan,
maybe nursing, elementary school teachers, social workers. If those were your first thoughts, you're correct. Those are the top 3 female-dominated careers in the country.
Thing going off, but there's no sound.
Oh.
Right.
Joan, I just want to pop in for a second. This is Heather. I just want to make sure, can everybody hear Joan when she was speaking a minute ago?
Yes.
Huh.
Matt, I don't know what's
good.
going on. So it looks like everybody can hear Joan except for Matthew. I am sorry about that, Matthew.
I can't hear her either. So
you can't hear either?
No. But if people can hear her, fine.
Okay.
Yeah, she can put a comment.
She just needs to switch the slide when she's done. Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right,
Give
Joan.
us a sign.
So I will let you go on then.
Okay. Let's see. And what does that mean? Besides the fact that if your child's in elementary school, the chances are good that both his teacher and the school nurse will be women. It matters because these fields are known as pink collar professions. There are roughly 20 of them, all dominated by women. And then there are also the museum world's sister professions, libraries and archives, where women have gained ground since 1950. But today, 61% of all library directors are women, and women now outnumber men 3-to-1 in the archives field. But wait, if you just believe the Bureau of Labor Statistics that Ann just referenced, that we're now at 41%. So we've approached and moved away from a tipping point over the last several years. But also remember that more women are finishing college than men today, and more museum studies programs are dominated by women. So it's likely that in a decade or two, museums will join libraries and archives as pink collar professions. Should we be comfortable in a female-dominated profession? Probably not. economists and workplace psychologists warn that gender-balanced workplaces are more efficient, more inventive, and more productive. Second, research shows that men in female-dominated professions are paid more, yes, that again, and promoted more quickly, leaving their female colleagues behind. And last, female-dominated professions carry a social stigma. In plain English, that sometimes means women are paid less because they are in women's jobs, and women's jobs are paid less because they're done by women. To make matters worse, in a 2011 study done, it showed us that 54% of their respondents said they didn't care about the gender of their boss, but 31% still preferred working for a man. What does this type of deep-seated behavior mean for our field?
Thanks, Joan. Back to me again, and I have another poll question, of course. So here's my question to you now. On a scale of 1 to 5, with 1 being completely unaware and 5 being aware and actively addressing equity, where would you rank your museum on its level of awareness about equity issues?
I can hear you, Anne.
Okay, thanks.
Are we going to see the results?
So we'll give you a minute to answer that, and then we'll take a look at what people are saying.
I think we have a good response right now if you want me to share the results.
Okay.
Okay.
Yes, please. Thank you, Heather.
So it looks like 21% answered number 4, and 3% answered number 1, 6% number 2, and 15% number 3.
Okay, good, because I'm not seeing those, so that's helpful.
I think I might have hit the wrong button.
So it looks like you're all moving. Oh, there you go. Okay, so we're moving in the right direction, folks, and that's really heartening to see. And it might be something to talk about at some point for NEMA to talk about. Maybe is how do you move the needle on this scale? We're going to give you some ideas in the next few slides, but this could be a good follow-up conversation too after our webinar today.
Oh, definitely. Okay, so I will stop
sharing.
Go back. So there you go.
Okay, thanks. So moving towards equity, a respondent to one of the Joyful Museum's workplace culture surveys wrote, quote, "Having been a museum professional for 15 years, I can only say that serious changes are needed, and most of them should come at the board or the leadership levels," end quote. Well, the good news is that more museums are embracing equity issues across the board, as we've seen from our poll. And we can also say that our museum professional associations have finally openly and boldly embraced equity, inclusion, diversity, and intersectionality as critical issues to be addressed. They've embraced them. Now we've got to see if they take them anywhere. But they certainly can pave the way for the rest of us. But the fact of the matter is that each of us and every one of our institutions must challenge the status quo and work to make equity a reality for all museum workers. So it's about this organizational culture, building a culture that's going to support the notion of equity as well as inclusion and diversity and intersectionality. While museums should be some of the most committed institutions to these issues, in fact, we often say it, implementing equity with purpose and care can be challenging. And I think the first place to start to diagnose your institution's equity challenges is to look who's working in your museum, both paid and volunteer, and what they're doing and how much they're making and what their access to benefits and promotions look like, to essentially do an inventory. An equity inventory within your institution. Now, some of you are maybe not in the position of being able to do that, but certainly if you're a departmental leader, if you're the leader of the institution, if you're a board leader, you have that ability to do that. And it seems to me that the only way that you can figure out where your gaps are is by inventorying what you've got first and foremost, and what's actually going on in your institution. And Joan will talk a little bit more about that in the coming slides. But once you know what you're dealing with, then you can finally put some muscle into forging a new or renewed commitment to addressing inequity or to reinforcing equity. Understand, as the Joyful Museum survey respondent does, that institutional commitment to equity must come from the top. And even though we said one of our myths is that change can happen anywhere in an institution, and indeed it can, and indeed I think staff can advocate for change, can help leaders show the way for change. Ultimately, if the board is not practicing equitable practices in what they do and who's on their board, and if your staff leadership isn't doing it either, it's really hard for the rank and file to try and practice equity when their leadership isn't supporting them. So ultimately, it's got to come from the top. Once you have it, it's got to be imbued then throughout the organization in all the policies and the practices and the interactions. You've got to walk the talk. And for individuals, working towards equity requires recognizing and naming inequitable practices and finding your champions to work with and through leadership and work through leadership to affect change. This is where sharing stories and strategies for constructive action can be very useful, I think. And this is where our professional associations may be able to play a very important role, because they have the ability, I think, to go well beyond just saying, oh, equity is good, to using their bully pulpits and their standards programs to rally and to cajole and provide positive reinforcement. So I think the bottom line here to remember is that a rising tide does lift all boats, and we've got to work equity and inclusion and diversity and intersectionality in all its various angles throughout the institution, through our professional associations, and we have to, take it to heart individually that we're going to work on this and we're going to move things forward. So I'll pass it back to Joan.
Hi, everyone. I'm here to talk about some policies and practices. We will share the links with Heather and Scarlett afterwards, so the things I talk about you can get from them. Two good places to look at for the broadest type of equity and diversity policies are the AHA, the American Historical Association, and the ALA, the American Library Association, which I might add is light years away from AAM in advancing the cause of equity. Even though we're very pleased about everything that's happened with AAM in the last year, ALA got there about a decade ahead of us. We'll also share a link to the National Museum of Wales. Generally, UK museums are also way ahead of American museums in having their own equity policies. Looking sort of internally, if you haven't looked at your personnel policy lately, if you don't even know where it is, you might want to dig it out and just have a look at it. If you don't have access to an HR director because you're a very small institution, you might want to see if the local chamber can help you look at your personnel policy and make sure it is up to date in all its aspects. You might also want to think about things like your internet use policy. If you don't have one, there are all sorts of gender issues that surround that. And you may want to create a statement, a value statement and a wage equity statement, so gender equity becomes part of your organizational policy. And you should let people know that. You should issue a press release and do a session at your regional service organization like NEMA's annual meeting. Take a stand on these issues. Doing that is rare, and acknowledging these issues is rare, but how could it possibly hurt a museum, historic house, or heritage organization if women knew that it was committed to paying equitably? Last, I'd remind you to know what's going on at your museum, because it's really unfair to preach institutional open-mindedness to the public if in the break room you tolerate cruel remarks or inequity. Make sure that your institutional culture models how you want your museum to be in the world. I'd also like to address just the whole gender equity agenda. As Anne has referenced, we are pleased with everything that AAM and ASLH is doing. Gender diversity does begin at the top. We need to have their support in figuring out ways to deliver information, to train boards of trustees, to insist on equal pay for equal work and equitable practices in hiring, promotion, and training. In our museum studies programs, we need to foster discussion about gender equity in the classroom, about teaching students what it means to join a pink-collar profession, since we see that on the horizon, and to help students understand salary negotiation and advancement. Last, we think it might be great if IMLS, should it survive this administration, fund a comprehensive equity and diversity study for museums, libraries, and archives, support of equity and diversity training for board trustees, and that they base funding decisions in part on an institution's gender equity policies. So I'll turn it back to Anne.
And we have another poll question here that follows up on what Joan's been talking about. And there are two questions actually, and that is, does your museum have a written HR policy? And who deals with HR issues at your museum? So we'll give you a minute to weigh in on those two questions, and then we'll take a look. And Joan, did you say that that NEMA was going to be able to provide links to people for some of the institutions that you talked about in your last couple of slides, like the American Library Association, etc.?
I said that. I'm hopeful that they will, yes.
No, we will. Today's session's actually being recorded, so we will be sharing the link to that, and we can actually add a bunch of other links to the NEMA website after the lunch with NEMA, but give me a few minutes to do it. I usually get emails right away, so it takes me a few minutes. So it looks like we're about 14 out of 31 for the slide, so I'm going to end your voting right now and share the results.
Wow.
Okay, so on that first one, well, maybe Joan, you want to weigh in on this one.
Well, that's kind of depressing, actually. I really urge you all, especially the people in the know and the never seen the HR policy, to try and find the answer to that. It doesn't make you a bad person to ask for those things, and no matter where you are in the museum, in sort of the job tree or staff, you should feel perfectly comfortable in asking about a policy and in potentially sort of leading the charge to get one. It's kind of like insurance. You never you don't think you need it till you need it, and then you really need it. Is there anything else, Anne?
I would also encourage folks to check in with their state nonprofit association. Certainly with NEMA, but sometimes the state nonprofit associations are really up to speed on a lot of this stuff, and have templates, and can also maybe cite the law and any other requirements of nonprofits. I know in New York State, of course, New York is very legally bound up in things, but a couple of years ago, the state legislature here passed a not-for-profit revitalization act, which is now law, and that stipulates a variety of policies, and may very well, in fact, speak to some employment-related issues as well. I'm not overly familiar with the act, but it's worth checking that angle, I think.
We got a comment as well.
From Sarah?
Yeah.
Who tried to write one and get it enacted, and it gathered dust. So Sarah, you've got to, I think, work your angle through some of your strongest champions in your institution or on your board. Might be time to dust it off and see what you can do again.
And to
sometimes
answer,
yeah.
And to answer Jennifer's question, I know NEMA does an AAM might, but also to let you guys know, I'm actually working on the 2016 salary survey for AAM, so I do have a couple pieces that I can tell you. We asked a question about museums that have personnel policy or handbooks, and 84% said that they did, and then 13% said that they do not have a published handbook, and 1.2 said they're unsure. So to give you guys some background on that one too from the salary survey.
The Association for Science and Technology Centers has a diversity toolkit on their website that you can download that's fairly extensive and may have information, I haven't looked at it in a little while, related to the salary and wage equity pieces. Joan mentioned that there are a number of European museums and museum associations that have diversity and gender equity statements. You'll have to remind me, Joan. I think many of them are in the UK, but I think also in Scandinavia. I mean, these organizations are light years ahead of some of us.
I don't remember any by name in Scandinavia. I'm putting up the one for the Museum of Wales right now. But yeah, if you go, I think the
Australia, Canada,
the UK version of AAM is called I think it's the Museum Association in the UK, and that can give you access to a lot of UK museums.
Yeah. So we are actually going to have some questions and some time for questions here. But before we do that, I'll just give you the quick skinny on GEMM, Gender Equity in Museums Movement. By telling you that sometimes one thing leads to another, and common interests lead to action. In 2016, 4 of us, Joan, Jessica Ferry, and Marika Van Dam, and I joined forces for a roundtable discussion at AAM's annual meeting, where we talked about our session title. Let me put it that way, because it gets a little confusing. What we talk about when we don't talk about women in museums. And we were buoyed by an enthusiastic response from that audience, which led us to think, well, maybe we should be working together more on some other kinds of related issues. So our little group slowly expanded, and we have Scarlett and Matthew here, and 1 or 2 others. And GEMM was born. The Gender Equity in Museums movement is committed to raising awareness about gender equity in the museum workplace. Through dialogue, discussion, and social media, GEMM focuses on challenges and opportunities in the museum workplace for women of all colors, sexual identification, and orientation. GEMM's network and online presence is a place where all museum workers are welcome, where workplace inequity questions can be discussed, best practices can be identified, and answers sought. Our platform paper, entitled A Call for Gender Equity in the Museum Workplace, was published last year, and you can download that from our website, and I hope you do, and pass it around. And the intention of that paper was really to reignite the work of a group of women at AAM back in the early 1970s called the Women's Caucus. We offer strategies to get involved and to move gender equity forward individually and collectively. So go to our website, please, and download the paper. We also will be soon unveiling a series of tip sheets that we're calling 5 Things You Need to Know. And they'll be on a variety of topics, and they're coming soon. The tip sheets I think that are in the hopper right now are about salary negotiation, successful networking, and growing and developing your leadership. And we hope to see you if you're planning to go to AAM in St. Louis, we hope to see you there. GEMM will be at AAM's Open Forum on Diversity, Equity, Accessibility, and Inclusion. Joan and I are also presenting, and I guess maybe I should also make the final unabashed pitch for the fact that Joan and I have a book coming out this summer called Women in the Museum, Lessons from the Workplace, and that's going to be published by Routledge and will be out I think in August, so I can't wait for it actually. Anyway, I'm going to now turn it over to question time. So please, oops, I'm sorry. Nope. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm not turning it over to question time. One more slide. I'm sorry, Scarlett.
No, that's okay. One of our founding members, Marika Van Dam, is working on a worker engagement survey. So if you haven't taken it already, the deadline is coming up on March 31st, and I know she'd really appreciate your feedback. Go to joyfulmuseums.com. I don't know if you can click that link in this webinar, but it's on there, and you have till the 31st. It'll also be posted on the Facebook feed as well. So now we'll open it up for Q&A. Anybody have any questions?
If you have any questions, go ahead and type them in the chat feature, and I'll make sure to include all the links that are in the chat feature on the NEMA website, including the link to the PDF, so you guys can download it from there.
I just want to share that when I was in school, I went to school at the BU program for museum and nonprofit management, and you were talking about how the schools have to start talking about the issues of museums and women. And when I was in my classes, I was likely only the only male, or maybe one other male, and they never once mentioned anything or talked about that issue and that massive differences in gender that were in their classes. So I think that would be a good way to start this for the future.
And NEMA, yep, we also coordinate salary negotiation workshops with AAUW. They're free to NEMA members. So we're going to be planning on having one in fall before conference, and we're working on a resume review session. So definitely stay tuned.
And we do know that there are museum studies programs that are bringing up the gender issue and just kind of general workplace issues, including things like salary negotiation and so forth. But it's at least the work that Joan and I have done for our book have borne out the fact that not enough of that is taking place in the classroom. And granted, I mean, classroom discussion can only go so far. And sometimes it's not helpful when you're actually in a working situation and you've got real people to deal with, real issues to work through. So these are the kind of issues that we need to be talking about all the time, and not just when stuff blows up, but we need to be talking about these things all the time and make them intentional and walk that talk.
And
so here's how you can get in touch with us. Oh, I'm sorry.
I was just going to add that I think that a lot of, one of the things that women struggle with, especially women coming fresh out of graduate school, is the, oh, I'm just so glad you wanted me syndrome. and they are so excited to get a job that they just say blindly yes, which is understandable because jobs in this field are hard to get. But I encourage everyone to use something like MIT's living wage calculator to at least make sure that you're going to be able to afford lattes, gas, and rent on your first salary. Okay, go ahead, Anne.
No, I just wanted to say this is how you can get in touch with us. There's our website address, there's our Facebook address, our email. We're going to be at AAM. So, and Joan and I are going to be at AASLH this fall too, talking about the women's book. So we hope to see you. And please, keep in touch. And if you have questions, be in touch with any one of the four of us, and we're happy to talk.
Yeah, thank you so much, all of you.
I think there was someone writing a question in there, so I want to make sure that she's able to ask the question before we kind of sign off. There we go. There's Nicole's question. She would be curious to see how many men are actually participating in the webinar.
Well, there's at least me.
Well, there's Matthew. I think
Matthew.
By just going off of names, I think there's one other male that is actually participating, but I'm not going to make any stereotypes on some of the names. So if they want to say something, that's fine. But no, it was a majority of the people that actually signed up were female for the webinar.
So Nicole, you've put your finger on an issue.
Yep.
That is often the case with webinars or any kind of educational training event, that often the people who need to be at it are not there, and we're preaching to the choir, so to speak. And so how to take the messages back, or how to encourage people to come and be part of the conversation is a big challenge for all of us.
I know it's something that we talk about quite a bit here in the NEMA office too, so we're very much aware of it.
What were you going to say, Matthew?
I was just going to say that for me, it's definitely something that men need to be involved in, because it's going to be hard to make any change happen without getting the men involved. And whenever I mention that I'm in this group with my friends, they all are interested, but then actually getting people to show up and speak out gets a little bit more difficult. However, when the Women's March happened, I saw a massive mix there, and that was hopeful for things of the future. Just how do you educate people not in the field about the field?
Yeah, and I see Erin has said it feels like it's interpreted as a woman's issue, and I think if any of you, just in answer to that question or the myth about change only happens from the top, one way for change to happen from the bottom is for all of you to leave here today thinking this isn't a women's issue, it's a human issue, and it affects all of us.
Yeah.
Is there any last minute issues questions before we sign off? Liz, you did. Yes, we do have less than normal today. We actually have a lot of other events going on today too, so I'm not sure if that might be the problem, because we have a big event going on in Connecticut. But that is a good question, is like, why is this particular issue not heavily attended by other people? I mean, that's definitely something that I've been thinking about the past couple of weeks, looking at the numbers and stuff, so that is definitely something to think about. And Nicole, yes, the PowerPoint will be available after the webinar when I put it online. So it will be under the Lunch with NEMA tab. If you go to the NEMA website, you'll be able to find the recording there, and also the links and a PDF of the presentation and a link to YouTube to see the video. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thanks,
everybody.
Heather and
Thank
Scarlett. Yeah.
Thanks, Heather.
Thanks. And I
Thanks,
do want to say
NEMA.
thank you guys for coming out today. I know it was, it's not always an easy topic to talk about and stuff like that. So I do want to thank the 4 of you guys for coming together to talk about this issue, because it is pretty important in the museum field, nonprofit, and life in general. So I want to say thank you,
Yes.
and thank you to everybody that came out today to listen to us. And
Okay.
actually join us for the April Lunch with NEMA. We'll actually be talking to Betsy Loring, who is on the phone call today with our listening in today, about Ecotarium's new exhibit. So we'll be focusing on exhibits and community.
Great.
All right.
Thank
All
you,
right.
everybody.
Thank
Thanks.
you again. Bye-bye.